Good afternoon and welcome to our lecture, Function and Flexibility, Trust from a Psychological Perspective, conducted by Professor Dr. Anne Böckler-Raettig. A warm welcome to you. I will later introduce you. A warm welcome to all of you, and I'm really looking forward to that lecture. And let me just give you a short invitation. Afterwards, we also have another panel at 2:30, which will also deal questions all around psychology and philosophy and the concept of interpersonal trust. So, Professor Dr. Anne Böckler-Raettig is a professor for research methods and social cognition at the University in Würzburg. She studied psychology in Berlin and Glasgow, and that was all followed by a research fellowship at Princeton University and a postdoctoral position at the Max Planck Institute in Leipzig. And then she also initiated herself a study, Emmy Noether Research Group, in 2017. And after a professorship in Hanover in 2020, she returned to Würzburg, where she's living today with her family. And her research focuses on social cognition and interaction. In our following short lecture, Anne Böckler-Raettig will take a developmental perspective, showing that from psychological research that people are, in fact, trusting and trustworthy by nature. She will also elaborate on how to partially keep, train, and foster this ability, and on what is needed in situations of misconduct of trust by others and/or institutions. After the lecture, you will also have the opportunity to ask questions and possibly then even stay for the other panel. So now the floor is yours. Thank you, Anne Böckler-Raettig, and thank you for the lecture and for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Katja. Would you give me my presentation? That would be awesome. I brought some pictures, so it's not all that boring. Perfect. Yeah, thank you, Katja, for the nice introduction. Thank you for having me, and thank you all for being here and for entrusting me with your time and with your attention. And I guess you have heard quite some takes and definitions even of trust already in the course of this great symposium. And I also won't spare you my 2 cents. So what I find most compelling about trust is that it involves accepting vulnerability when we interact with others. Trust is hoping, not knowing, but hoping that we will find in others what we want to find and not what we fear to find. And when we take this leap of faith, when we start partnerships in our work life, when we start or consolidate relationships in our private life, we notice something really important, that it is only when we trust others that we actually give them a chance to show us that they are, in fact, trustworthy. And we do this all the time, not always being aware of it. And when we let this happen, beautiful cooperations emerge, ideas flow, creativity, innovation is possible. Many studies show that when trust is high in work teams, their performance across a variety of situations and settings and tasks improves. People are also more healthier in teams that trust each other. Trust also allows democracies to function. We see that in societies with higher level of interpersonal trust, these societies have happier citizens, they have healthier citizens, and they have more and more meaningful political participation. And the list goes on and on. But of course, isn't it, the lingering question here is, I think, isn't it naive? Isn't it dangerous? You know, if you go to an extreme, isn't it dangerous to trust everybody? And I will argue that from a psychological perspective, it is much more dangerous to trust no one. And I will also show you this other extreme, the trusting no one extreme. When distrust prevails, then it's not only trust that breaks down, it is communication, it is cooperation, and those are not easily restored. Because distrust, and this is really one of its most characteristic traits, distrust is highly contagious. When we distrust someone, we behave in a reserved manner. We protect our own resources. We don't share information. After all, we don't want to give the other the opportunity to, take advantage, to breach our trust. But by doing so, we also don't give the other any chance to show us their trustworthiness. And even worse, our reservation is taken by the other as a sign of us ourselves being maybe deceitful, maybe dishonest, certainly selfish. And the other party responds by protecting their knowledge, their energy, their resources as well, and not sharing, not cooperating. And voila, our prophecy about the other's untrustworthiness is fulfilled. And this is what distrust does. It elicits vicious circles of ever more distrust, of aggression, of selfish behavior. And hoarding that we observed in the beginning of the pandemic is just one example where everybody was hoarding because they were partly at least afraid that everybody else would be hoarding and they wouldn't have any toilet paper left. And I think this picture actually accurately insinuates what we are left with when trust is lost, also in the long run. This was about interpersonal trust, but of course, trust can also be placed towards institutions, media, science, and when trust breaks down towards those, this also hampers interpersonal trust. It opens the doors to conspiracy beliefs, more extremist positions, the willingness to transgress laws of countries or states one doesn't believe in anymore, and eventually leads to harm for everybody. Of course, this was a very extreme picture, as I said. Luckily, trust isn't entirely present or entirely absent. There's a lot in between, and trust is flexible and context-dependent, and this is something that actually grows during our development. When we are born, we are entirely trustful, right? Newborns aren't leery. They don't expect anybody to hurt them or harm them. They just trust everybody. They would hug a wolf. But already in the first year of life, we see that kids are turning towards trustworthy behavior. So they recognize and they prefer agents, even agents they don't know, for instance, puppets that are enacted by scientists. They recognize and they prefer agents who are trustworthy, helpful, generous. And by the age of approximately 2 years, kids spontaneously show trustworthy behavior as well. They help strangers even though they're not rewarded. They comfort others who are sad. They show signs of compassion. So in their first year of lives, when they're not really capable of manipulation yet, they spontaneously show trustworthy behavior and they trust others. And they kind of have to, because no species is born as unfit for the world as we are. In our first weeks, months, years, some would argue decades, the parents here would argue decades, they desperately rely on the care of parents, of caretakers. And this brings a huge opportunity for caretakers to, show kids that even though we are never perfect, we will fail them at some point or the other, but in general, people are benevolent and they can be trusted. But it also comes with a huge responsibility, because when caretakers breach trust, when they mistreat us, when they abuse us, we find it incredibly difficult to regain trust, even in later relationships. And this already refers to something that I will end with, and this is that trust is an especially fragile thing when there is hierarchies involved, and when one party can do a lot more harm than the other. But continuing on this developmental path, something interesting happens 3, 4, 5 years later. Kids actually become more and more selective. They don't trust everybody anymore. We see, and I brought just a few examples, we see that between the ages of 3 and 5, kids increasingly trust their own eyes or the testimony of others who already were truthful over the testimonies of others whom they have caught in a lie. So kids learn who knows things and who tells the truth. Similarly, between the ages of 4 and 8, kids increasingly share their own resources with others who have a reputation of being nice, trustworthy, generous themselves. And this makes sense, because from the ages of 3, 4 onwards, kids learn. They learn many social abilities, emotional abilities like compassion, but also cognitive abilities like perspective taking. Understanding that other people can hold different knowledge, different beliefs, but also different goals, and that other people can say one thing but mean the other, because this is what they can do themselves. And overall, of course, this becoming more and more selective is necessary. But it is not just a blessing, because with age, kids don't only learn emotional cognitive abilities, they also increase in biases, stereotypes, and prejudice. And what we also see increasing with age is something that we call in-group favoritism. Kids trust their own more than the others. And their own can be people who look like them, people who dress like them. In kids, it's often gender-related for a while. And they do so even though this is not justified or even rational. So, like with all interpersonal behaviors and tendencies, trust is not free from biases. But as I said before, trust is flexible and trust remains flexible. We have to find it in ourselves, but we also can find it in ourselves. And I brought a few examples for that. Again, on an interpersonal level, when trust is breached, for instance, in romantic relationships, we can forgive and we can be forgiven. And studies show that it's not only forgiving your partner, but also being forgiven by your partner that fosters your trust in them. And this also works towards strangers to a degree. Our own studies show that meditation-based practices, trainings, especially when they focus on positive interpersonal emotions like compassion, like interconnection or gratitude, can actually enhance pro-social behavior towards strangers, like generosity, helpfulness, but also trust. And this shows us again that trust is not only in the other person's behavior. Trust is also in our own cognitive abilities, in our emotional attitudes. And this is marvelous because it's not only distrust that is highly contagious, it is also trust that is contagious. Trust breeds pro-social behavior, breeds more trust, breeds more pro-social behavior, and not only in humans, but also in bats, interestingly enough, and in rats. And maybe in cats, I don't know, that would be a logical following. And I think that would be an optimistic and a very positive point to stop. But this is actually not where I want to end, because I've been talking about interpersonal trust a lot, and this is usually where we are actually really good, because we're also biologically, there is a system ingrained in us that really supports trust, interpersonal trust. But we cannot maintain or repair on a purely interpersonal level what is often neglected or even broken on a structural one. A challenge that we faced, I think, is that we observe so many institutions responsible for the well-being of the people they serve, positions of power, abusing power, and breaching trust. And I think each of us can think of scandals involving this kind of abuse of power by banks, car companies, democratic institutions as well. Universities are no exception. And when institutional trust is broken, this has really long-lasting and severe and damaging consequences, because when interpersonal, when institutional trust is broken, this has very negative consequences on interpersonal trust. It crushes communication, it crushes cooperation, and our willingness to cooperate. And these are the very things that uphold our societies and our democracies. And I think trust needs to be maintained, established, re-established on an institutional level by positions of power. But how can this be done? Especially, how can this be done by us? Because we cannot force trust on anybody. And unlike power, that can be, at least in some instances, violently even taken from those who have abused it, this does not work with trust. So what can we do? And I think you don't need to be the CEO of a major company for this to apply to you. Because I think you all come with, certainly with privilege, with power over, with influence on, and with responsibility for others. Be it students, children, a team, employees, be it voters or readers or followers. And when you are in these positions, this means you need to go first. You need to be the one to be trustworthy, to be just, reliable, taking responsibility. But even more importantly, you need to be the first to trust. Before you ask your children, your students, your employees, your voters, your readers to trust you, you need to trust them first. Because this trust really lays the foundation for honest eye-to-eye communication, for true transparency, and for real participation. And this is really, I think, the only way how we can address this challenge. So leaps of faith need to come from higher up. And whenever you find yourselves in a place higher up, then you know what you need to do. And I wish you a joyful jumping. Darf ich mich? Wunderbar.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anne. Very interesting insights. I'm not sure, and it's not that easy to see, but maybe there are some questions from the public. And if you have a question, please raise your hand, and we have a colleague over here who can hand you over the microphone. And there is already the first question over there. Thank you.
Hello. I'd like to know how stable the concept of trust is over a lifetime of a person. Is it like a very personal trait, or does it change a lot depending on how you interact with others?
Thank you. That's an excellent question for a psychologist, really. This really depends, like, on the stance you take. Like, when you look on groups of people overall, so like when you make these general predictions, then overall there is some stability. So people, there is part of the variance we find between people remains stable through our life. So overall, some people are more trusting than others. But of course, this doesn't tell you much when it comes to your own personal life, right? Because there you totally see variances. You see a lot of dynamic, and you of course see a lot of factors that matter. Whom do you interact with? Because some people are generally trustworthy to a degree, maybe to a relatively high degree, but they don't make any differences. And some people trust their best friends with their lives, but they are kind of not entirely trustful towards strangers. So when we zoom into an individual, we see a lot of interesting variance. But adding to that, there is stability as well. Yeah.
Thank you. There are already a lot of other questions, so we have maybe 10 minutes to answer them all.
I have the microphone here. Hi. Hi, I'm here. So you said trust is flexible, and you talk about meditation as a way to train it. Can you develop, please?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a point that nicely refers actually to the question before. So we are equipped with this kind of muscle, you could say. Like we need trust because we're born totally helpless. And because we have a system that we're already come equipped with, we have something we can train. Like we can train our muscles in the gym, we can train, learn instruments and languages because we come with certain potential, and this applies for trust as well. And what we did do in this meditation is or in this meditation intervention studies, we tried to see what is it actually? How can we build this muscle more? And we try to differentiate certain aspects that usually come with kind of our Western approaches to meditation. Like one is mindfulness, so breathing, being in the present moment. Another one was perspective taking. That was actually focused on a cognitive approach. So really trying to understand that other people come from a different situation, from different standpoints. And a third module was emotional. That was really cultivating compassion, cultivating this feeling of interconnection with other people, cultivating gratitude, positive emotions. And that was the module that worked. And I think that has a lot to do with the original kind of biological oxytocin-based system that is also really kind of close to these emotional bonding aspects and attachment. And I think that is also part why this worked best. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think we come to the next question. Maybe over there.
Thank you. Thanks for the wonderful sharing. So my question is that people are prone to trust, but is it natural to betray the trust or to break the trust? And if not, what is like the cognitive, or what's happening in people's brain when people do that? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. It's painful. What happens with social pain is extremely similar to what happens when you feel physical pain. Like, except of kind of some sensory areas, when we're talking about the brain, the pain is the same. So it's one of the most painful experiences. Like it's comparable to the opposite of reward, basically. When you lose somebody, being a trustful other, this is what happens. It's a really painful response that we show, and this is also something we experience subjectively. And I would argue that, of course, it's painful when trust is betrayed. But and I'm aware that I'm speaking from a position of privilege here, and about, you know, trust, breaches of trust, say, that are kind of normal in everyday life, and it's mainly about those. And these are experiences that we all have constantly, right? Even though most of our everyday experiences are positive and cooperative, sometimes we are disappointed in others. And I think this does come with a lot of chances, because when others breach our trust, this is the only instance when we can learn that we can find it again, that we can repair relationships, that we can reinstantiate our trust. And this is something that helps us trust in ourselves as well. So I think, to a degree, this really is an opportunity that is part of our social lives, because other people will always breach our trust just because they have other goals than we are. And we will also, we can never avoid breaching others' trust. I mean, we can try to become better and better, but at some point we will always, our goals differ, and we will disappoint others, say. So I think we come equipped not only with trusting and with behaving trust in a trustworthy manner, but also with repairing and regaining trust. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting point. So I've seen 2 or 3 more hands, just a sec. So maybe we can allow another 2 questions, and then we have another look at the time. Maybe here?
Just a short question. You just mentioned meditation methods that help to gain trust again. Is there a name or a source for it? Sounds quite interesting.
Absolutely, yeah. These studies were done at the Max Planck, and the overall name is Resource Project. So I think there's a lot you can find, Resource Project. That was Tanya Singer who PI'd the whole thing, yeah. And I think one of the meditations that were that took an important part of this affect module was loving kindness meditation. Yeah.
And I think just behind there was another question.
Thank you. I was just wondering, because you were talking about babies being born with the ability to trust. What happens to if that ability is not being met, if babies cannot trust their parents and not, you know, the attachment is broken? Are they just scarred for life, or can they meditate when they get older and regain the trust? Or what are we talking about here?
Right. Yeah, thank you very much. Like, for the first question, there is a general answer, like what we see overall, and then there's always the individual. And there have been studies on these adverse experiences early in life. For instance, there's certain orphanages where people have become actually study subjects for the rest of their lives. And so we do know something about when attachment is, or early experiences of trust are actually are broken, when there are no reliable caretakers, or when parents even mistreat children. And the overall kind of finding in many studies is that you do see scars for life, absolutely. You see reduced levels of interpersonal, motivation, interpersonal affective consequences, and also interpersonal cognition is slower to develop, or remaining kind of on a very low basis. Especially the motivation part is the kind of the willingness to trust again. But this is only an average, finding, and there's so many stories, individual stories of people finding their way back. And what we see in children as well is that it's not kind of this linear thing where you have, if you have one nice parent, that's already quite nice. If you have 2 nice parents, if you have 3 nice parents, if you have 6 nice parents, you're actually a superhero in, interpersonal behavior. And that's not what we see. It's actually sufficient. If there is a person you can trust, that's what makes the difference. It doesn't need to be the perfect childhood. For some, it's actually if you have somebody to rely on, and this doesn't necessarily need to be a parent that you know from very early on. There is always the potential in us, and it remains in us. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe just allow me a very closing question, because I think time is already running out.
Yeah, I just want to ask, like, is it possible that you have, for example, if someone is a dancer, so maybe you don't have trust in yourself, but then you learn a craft. And this craft, you become so good in it that a craft can give you the power to trust in yourself, and then you trust others.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a beautiful question. And I was actually thinking about the performance yesterday. Were you there? Yeah. Yeah. That was so beautiful. Yeah. Absolutely. I think they are really, this trust in yourself is really something that is linked to trust in others, because in a sense, yourself, your own abilities, your knowledge, whatever it is, if it's dancing, it can be music, it can be reading, it can be something you enjoy, something that gives you, that empowers you, that gives you joy and equanimity. Totally. I think it doesn't necessarily have to be something that you do on a purely interpersonal level even. I think really trusting yourself or finding a place of solace in yourself is already an enormous source. Also for trust in others. Because in a sense, like, our brain is tiny, right? And we don't have this compartment for 20 different kinds of joy. I think it's pretty much a system that is related to reward and attachment. And it might be partly different neurotransmitters like dopamine, oxytocin, and so forth. But it's this kind of empowering place is pretty much one system, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for your lecture, dear Anna, and thank you so much for your active participation in this discussion. I think we could talk and talk, but now there's another panel coming up, and I would like to invite you to stay. I think we have a pause of 2 minutes. But thank you so much for these insights into, into the psychological perspective. Thank you so much.